In the history of alleged demonic possession, few cases are as infamous or as politically charged as the Loudun possessions of 17th century France. It's a tale that has everything: possessed nuns, accusations of witchcraft, political intrigue, and the fiery execution of a charismatic priest. The events that unfold in the small town of London between 1632 and 1634 would go on to inspire countless books, plays, even an opera. But what if I told you that the story you think you know, the one that's been dramatized and sensationalized over the centuries, might be built on a foundation of mass hysteria, political manipulation, and perhaps even deliberate fabrication? Let's start at the beginning. Loudun was a small town in west central France. Unremarkable, save for one key detail: it was one of the few places in France where Catholics and Protestants coexisted in relative peace. And this detail is crucial because it sets the stage for the religious and political powder keg that would soon explode. Enter Urbain Grandier, a charismatic and controversial Catholic priest. He was known for his good looks, his charm, and his liberal attitudes, particularly when it came to clerical celibacy. He was also a vocal supporter of keeping Loudun's fortifications intact against the wishes of Cardinal Richelieu, the chief minister of France, who was on a mission to centralize power. Now, pause here and consider the historical context. This was a time of great religious and political upheaval in France. The wars of religion had recently ended, and the country was still deeply divided along religious lines. Moreover, the concept of witchcraft and demonic possession was very real to people of the 17th century. The infamous witch hunts were in full swing across Europe. So it's against this backdrop that our story begins. In 1632, a group of nuns at the local convent began to display bizarre symptoms. They convulsed, spoke in strange voices, and claimed to be possessed by demons. And here's the kicker: these demons accused Urbain Grandier of witchcraft and of sending them to possess the nuns. Now, to our modern ears, this sounds absurd, but in 17th century France, it was taken very seriously indeed. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic and controversial witch trials in French history. But here's where we need to go deeper. What was really going on in that convent? And why was Urbain Grandier targeted? To answer these questions, we need to consider several factors. First, there's the nature of convent life in the 17th century. These were often not places of quiet contemplation, but pressure cookers of repressed sexuality and ambition. Many women ended up in convents not by choice, but because they had no other option in a patriarchal society. And then there's the power of suggestion and group dynamics. Once one nun starts displaying symptoms of possession, it's not hard to imagine how this behavior could spread. This is a phenomenon psychologists call mass psygenic illness. You may know it by a more familiar term, mass hysteria. But why target Grandier? And here's where the story gets really interesting. The Mother Superior of the convent, Jeanne d'Assas, had a reputation for sensuality and ambition. Some historians have suggested that maybe she was infatuated with the handsome Grandier, despite never having met him. And when he refused to become the convent's spiritual director, it may have sparked a desire for revenge. Moreover, Grandier had made powerful enemies. His support for maintaining Loudun's fortifications put him at odds with Cardinal Richelieu. His liberal attitudes and alleged affairs with local women, including the daughter of a powerful prosecutor, had scandalized many. In short, there were plenty of people who would benefit from his downfall. And as the possessions intensify, so did the public spectacle. Exorcisms were performed publicly, drawing in large crowds. The nuns withered and screamed, spoke in strange voices, and made lewd gestures. It was theater of the most sensational kind. But here's where we need to apply some critical thinking. Many of the demonic behaviors displayed by the nuns are consistent with what we now understand as psychological conditions. The contortions can be explained by conversion disorder, a condition where psychologically distress manifests as physical symptoms. The speaking in tongues could be glossolalia, a well-documented phenomenon associated with the charismatic and Pentecostal revivals. Moreover, there is evidence to suggest that at least some of the nuns were faking their symptoms. Several later recanted their accusations against Grandier. One even admitted using secret passages in the convent to appear to be in two places at once, a miracle that had been attributed to demonic powers. Now, despite the shaky evidence, he's arrested in 1633. And the trial that followed was a travesty of justice by any standard. Grandier was tortured, evidence in his favor was suppressed, and his enemies were allowed to testify against him. And perhaps most damningly, a contract between Grandier and the devil was produced, a document so obviously forged that even some of Grandier's accusers were uncomfortable with it. And on August 18, 1634, Urbain Grandier was found guilty of witchcraft and burned at the stake. But here's the twist. Even after his death, the possessions continued. If Grandier was truly the cause, shouldn't his death have ended the nuns' torment? And the fact that the possessions continued suggests something else was at play. And this is where we need to look at the broader social and political context. The Loudun possessions occurred at a time when France was transitioning from a decentralized feudal system to an absolute monarchy. The cardinal, the power behind the throne, was on a mission to centralize authority. Loudun, with its mix of Catholic and Protestant population and its stubborn independence, was the thorn in his side. So could the entire affair have been orchestrated, or at least encouraged as a way to bring Loudun to heel? It's a theory that some historians have proposed. By discrediting Grandier, a vocal opponent of Richelieu's policies, and by turning Loudun into a hotbed of demonic activity, these central authorities had the perfect excuse to exert control over the town. But even if we don't go so far as to say there was a grand conspiracy, the Loudun possessions illustrate the dangerous intersection of politics, religion, and mass psychology. Consider the role of the exorcists brought in to deal with the possessed nuns. These men had a vested interest in proving the reality of the possessions. Their careers, their reputations, and their worldview all depended on demons being real and exorcism being effective. So is it any wonder that they would interpret the nuns' behavior as genuine possession? And then there's the broader population of Loudun. In a time of uncertainty and change, the possessions did this. They gave them a clear narrative of good versus evil. It gave people a sense of purpose, a common enemy to rally against. In short, it fulfilled that deep psychological need. So where does this leave us? Were the nuns truly possessed by demons? Was Urbain Grandier a witch? Or was this a case of mass hysteria, political manipulation, and scapegoating? Reality is, as often the case, likely involves elements of all these explanations. The nuns were clearly experiencing some form of psychological distress, whether genuine, whether faked, whether demonic, whether medical. Grandier, while almost certainly not a witch, was a controversial figure who had powerful enemies. And the entire affair was manipulated by various factors for their own ends. But in focusing solely on the question of whether the possessions were real, we risk missing the larger, more intriguing story. Because this is a tale about the power of group psychology, the dangers of unchecked authority, and the way societies construct narratives to make sense of chaos and change. The case of the Loudun possessions, it challenges us to think critically about how we interpret unusual events, especially those that align with our pre-existing beliefs or serve our interests. It invites us to consider how easily justice can be perverted when due process is abandoned in the face of moral panic. And perhaps the most valuable lesson we can take from the affair is this. In times of social upheaval and uncertainty, we must be especially vigilant against the demonization of individuals or groups. We must question narratives that seem too convenient and too aligned with the interests of those in power.